and welcome to the Quipster Film Review Podcast. My name is Vince Leo. I'm the author of the film review website, Quipster.net. I invite you to check out over 4,000 of my written reviews. You can read there at Quipster.net, QWIPSTER.net. I also want to remind you that since I'm going to be covering a couple of icons of the 80s and 90s and pretty much all the way through today, Keanu Reeves and Winona Ryder, in today's film, that I do a film review podcast covering the 1980s itself as an era for film. Just search for Around the World in 80s Movies, wherever you're listening to this right now, and you'll probably find it. Today I'm going to be covering, like I said, that Keanu Reeves and Winona Ryder starring vehicle. It is called Destination Wedding. It's out in a smattering of theaters. However, those people who have Amazon Prime can stream it today. It is part of their Amazon Prime streaming service. It's a film that is directed and written by Victor Levin, and it is rated R for language throughout and some sexual content. The runtime is 1 hour and 30 minutes. In this film, Winona Ryder plays a woman named Lindsay, who's a guest at the wedding of her ex-fiancé. She's en route via airplane to his wedding in Paso Robles, California, or Paso Robles, as they discuss in this movie. It's one of the premier wine regions in the country. Now, while she's in the airport awaiting her departure, she's instantly at odds with another man who's also waiting for the same plane. Unfortunately, she also ends up seated next to this guy on the flight within this tiny plane, and then she ends up staying at the same hotel next to each other in adjoining rooms. And she comes to find out he is Frank. He's the mostly estranged half-brother of her ex-fiancé and is also there to attend the same wedding. These are two miserable people. They're forced to be together at this event, celebrating the marriage of someone neither of them really particularly care for. So what could go wrong, or what could go right? As you know, Keanu Reeves and Winona Ryder have been around a long time in the acting business. They started out as stars in the 1980s. They've shared the screen on a couple of occasions in the past in movies like Bram Stoker's Dracula or A Scanner Darkly. They didn't really share that many scenes within those movies, but they were there together. Destination Wedding is going to make you wish that they had starred in a number of movies altogether all along. For 90 minutes, they get the only on-screen speaking parts. They bicker, they insult one another, they're equally disgusted by the behavior, as well as, more appropriately, the happiness of those around them. But that allows us to believe that these two misfits could actually be an item if they could manage to drop all of their pretenses of misanthropy and the self-loathing due to they themselves leading some disappointing lives. Destination Wedding as a film is written and directed by Victor Levin. I'm mostly familiar with his name because he was the writer of the 2004 film Win a Date with Tad Hamilton. He's also one of the main writers and the co-executive producer for that long-running TV show, Mad About You. That was a relationship show, very much in keeping with some of the vibe that you get here, even though this one's a little bit more cynical. His best work here, though, I would say could be said to be as a writer. The film is chock full of very quotable, witty dialogue. However, as a director, Levin actually knows well enough to stay out of the way of his own dialogue and of his main actors, those actors embodying these characters in ways that make thoroughly contemptuous and unlikable people somewhat endearing. Keanu Reeves, Winona Ryder, those are the only two actors with speaking parts in this film. And that allows us to see that, indeed, these two who have entered middle age are isolated. They're alone. And that's somewhat by their own choice. Even group activities within the pre-wedding build-up itself, including rolling around in these inflatable bobble balls, that sees these two acerbic guests separating from the rest of the others. Even in a group, they're still alone. And I can relate to that on a personal level sometimes. Now, characterizations in this film, as with most romantic comedies, if you want to call this romantic, they don't really run deep, but I would say they are effective enough for us in the audience to understand these characters enough for the story to work. They have idiosyncratic behavior. Frank has a persistent need to make a lot of gross fanfare when he's clearing out the phlegm in his sinuses. It shows he's not afraid to put off those around him, and he's only really concerned about his own desire for his personal comfort. Meanwhile, Lindsay has more to say to plants than she ever does to any humans that she's not forced to engage with, like Frank, and she connects more with forms of life that really have no expectations out of her other than to continue providing them carbon dioxide. And just as with his turn in Neon Demon, Keanu Reeves gets to be in a film where there's this random encounter with a mountain lion. That's the catalyst necessary for the two characters to finally let down their guard, even if it's for a moment, in order to bond against a more immediate concern. Destination Wedding as a film, it may not measure up to being great filmmaking by those standards that we typically measure films, but I do think that it is a funny film for those who prefer witticism and intellectual banter to physical pratfalls or injections of needless vulgarity. The film is R-rated, and there is a little bit of vulgarity, including a fairly lengthy sex scene that's played for laughs. There's no nudity in it, but it doesn't shy away from that prolonged sequence. In this way, I think some viewers are going to be reminded of another film that's set in California's Central Coast wine country, a film I really love called Sideways, although I would say that Destination Wedding is more limited than Sideways in its ambition to try to tie in the characters' plights with something bigger to say about life. In Destination Wedding, we find two damaged people who are not going to immediately transform overnight just because they found a kindred spirit in their misery, and their burgeoning courtship is reflective of their closed-off nature. Although as a romance, it's not as traditionally romantic as some viewers may be expecting from the advertising or the cover or the execution. Ultimately, the underlying message still is a hopeful one. Even haters like these two can find love. I actually enjoyed Destination Wedding for a low expectation comedy. I actually watched this film in the Paso Robles area. My wife and I took a trip for our anniversary, our second anniversary there. It's kind of a tradition for us because on the trip that I proposed to her, which was in Napa Valley, which is also wine country in California, we watched A Walk in the Clouds. That was another Keanu Reeves film. So a tradition for us to watch a Keanu Reeves film in the area that we're staying on a vacation of romance. So I hope he keeps it up, because otherwise we're going to have to go to San Dimas, California and go to Raging Waters or something in order to do our next trip. But for now, I'm going to give Destination Wedding 3 stars out of 4. 3 stars on my scale means that I do recommend it for those people who like this kind of movie. If you're a fan of these 2 stars, if you like misanthropic, witty, sarcastic, caustic banter, this film definitely is chock full of that. If you're looking for something that's going to bring you a little bit closer to your significant other in a very romantic way, this is not going to fit that bill, I would say, unless you and your partner just basically hate the world, in which case maybe you'll relate somewhat to this film on that level, at the very least. So even if you're not with somebody, I still think that it's worth watching. 3 stars out of 4 for the pretty funny Destination Wedding. Thanks everyone for listening. I hope that you enjoyed this review. If you do happen to see Destination Wedding and you have other thoughts other than what I brought out here, you can write to me. You can find my contact information at my website, quipster.net, QWIPSTER.net. Until next time, I hope you enjoy your time anytime you get to go to the movies, or you're even watching a streaming film at home from one of your services like Amazon Prime, as Destination Wedding is for those people who subscribe to that service.